recording to the cloud.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. It's good to see you all. I'm Chad Cooper. I am the Executive Director of Sustainable Sanctuary Coalition, and we're one of the co-hosts tonight. So I really appreciate you all joining. I know there's lots going on in people's lives, and so the fact that you joined us is greatly appreciated. I'm out in Colorado. As some of you know, I'm in the military. I'm a chaplain in the Air Force, and I'm on active duty now. So I'm zooming in from Colorado Springs. So you might, each of you might put into the chat where you're zooming in from, and we'll see all the different places we're coming from. So anyway, I want to give plenty of time for Chick. And so, Jerry, are you going to introduce Chick? Or
I think Chick needs no introduction that he can't do for himself. So I'll let Chick introduce himself. All right, Chick?
All right. Well, without further ado, I'll turn it over to Chick and let him get started.
Okay. Hey, welcome to everybody for class number 2 and the final class on climate change. Last week we focused on there's a problem, and we spent an hour and a half talking about the problem and what causes it and all the impacts. Tonight we're going to focus on solving the problem, and the topic is, and I got this from Jerry, he's saying he's instructed me we need to have more hope, and people need to have hope. So I tend to be a glass half empty guy, so I'm trying to turn into a glass half full guy tonight. And there is definitely hope, and we can outline what could or will happen to solve climate change tonight. Let's see. Okay, a summary last week on the class 1, there is a problem. We talked about the number of billion-dollar storms on the rise. Over the last 20 years, we've averaged about $6 billion storms a year, and then in 20 and 21, we had $20 billion storms in each year. And if we keep going, the CO2 content keeps going up. In 10, 15, 20 years, we'll probably be up to 30 to 40 billion dollar storms every year. But we talked about CO2 up in the atmosphere, greenhouse gases in general is the problem. We're at 420 today. The Paris Peace Accord set 450 as the absolute limit, not Paris Peace Accord, Paris Climate Accord. We don't want to go over 450 because it starts a lot of tipping points. And there's been a goal set of 50% reduction in CO2 emissions by 2030. And we have had no reduction in CO2 emissions yet. So it's like we're in day one starting the challenge almost. Because of climate change, we've talked about there's trillions of dollars of economic destruction and economic creation. We went through some of that, and we'll go through it again tonight. Just a couple current events I saw during the week. One said we ought to quit using the word drought because the word drought implies there's an end. And so I tried to think of a word that meant drought that doesn't end, and I don't think the English language has one because it's probably never occurred before. So we need to invent a new word for it. Also on the major weather events, they're daily now. So we got the fires in New Mexico now. We've got the heat challenge in India where we're over 120 degrees, and some of those people not only don't have air conditioning, some of them don't have fans. So we'll likely see a lot of heat deaths in India in the next few weeks. Denver, there's dust storms today, I've been told, and I've been told those are quite unusual in Denver. But you know, if you get the wind, which drives the fire, and then you have some fields that don't have the ground cover on them, you're going to get dust storms. Tonight, 3 parts to the presentation tonight on There Is Hope. And by the way, you guys can interrupt anytime, ask any question you want. I've been doing these presentations for 2 or 3 years. I can easily talk for an hour and a half on this. Or if you guys need clarification clarification or you want to call me on a point or anything like that, that's fine. So feel free to interrupt you whenever you want. And every 10 slides or at the end of every part, I'll stop and ask for questions. So in part one, I want to talk about attitudes, plans, funding, and leadership. They're all important. And we're going to look where we are on those items, because without them, we're not going to solve climate change. Part two, we need to implement technology to reduce CO2 emissions by 50%. And what I'm saying there is we haven't implemented the technology really, we've got to do it. So solar, wind, batteries, electric cars, regenerative farming, those are like 10, 15% implemented today. We got to get those up to 100% implemented. So that's a big program. And then once we get that done, we need innovation to get to zero carbon emissions. And we'll talk about where the innovation may come from. Then in part three, we'll talk about organizing the solution into three parts: adaptation, regulation, and innovation, i.e. new technology. Oops, back up. Okay, this is a contribution I got from Jerry. He sent me an email on the updated YLE study. They've been taking a survey for several years, at least 5, on how Americans feel about climate change. And the good news, there's more people up in that alarmed group. And if you add the alarmed and concerned group, that's good. The alarmed group jumped to 33%. If you add the two together, the alarmed and concerned was at 50%, and now it's up to 58% in 21. We need that alarmed and concerned. We need alarmed to get up to 50%, and we need alarmed and concerned together up to 70, but we need a groundswell. There's just other problems out there right now that I'm going to talk about later that are getting more attention. And we need to get this up to number 1 so it's going to get attention. And the good news is it's getting more attention. But it's encouraging. I mean, to me, going from 50 to 58% is a nice jump. Okay, the reason it's going up is climate change is getting a lot of visibility. When I started teaching this stuff 2.5 years ago, you didn't see that many articles on it. Today, I see articles every day in multiple publications, and they all have the phrase "because of climate change." So it's starting to get beat on everybody out there. Weather events are making national and international news daily, so that gets us more attention. There's a lot of groups out there, hundreds of subgroups out there that are working on climate change, and they get out stuff. Plus, today, there's just thousands of articles and papers being the scholarly ones by the PhDs, that are written annually that on the cause and potential solutions to climate change. And this is all good PR, and it's what we need. Okay, well, we're getting good PR. Unfortunately, we're getting no policy help coming out of the federal government. And the reason's twofold. One is, well, Republicans believe government's the problem, while the Democrats think government's the solution. But, well, so the Republicans are going to do nothing, and they've admitted they're going to do nothing. The Democrats think it's the problem, but the Democrats have a long list of problems they want to solve. So they've got like Black Lives Matter, the Ukraine, the problems on that we've got with China. There's a long list, and climate change is just on the list. Right now, Biden wants to get reelected, and he wants the Democrats to do well. And so while Biden ran on climate change and he wanted to pass climate change legislation, right now he sees the economy as the biggest problem. And so he's implementing policies today that are not good for climate change. Specifically, allowing oil and gas leases on federal lands, he's just started allowing, releasing the strategic oil reserve, relaxing ethanol regulations. These are all in an effort to try to get the price of gasoline down. Kind of goes back to Bill Clinton said, it's the economy, stupid. And if the Democrats are going to do well in the elections, they know they've got to get inflation down, so they're working on it. And then we've got the China problem, and this was started by Trump, and I applaud him for doing what he did. By the way, if anybody's curious, I'm a moderate. I'm a moderate Republican or a moderate Democrat, whichever one you want me to be. Implementing and enforcing trade laws with China. China's always been stealing with us and taking advantage of us. And so we've really ramped up our trade laws and we're starting to enforce them with China. And then all of a sudden, we kind of discovered that China was probably making the solar panels and the wind turbines with forced labor, the Uyghurs in central China. And that upset a lot of people. And so we've put a hold on some of that trade. And I can't tell you how much, but I've just read articles saying solar projects are held up because of it. Republicans refuse to vote on climate change regulation. That's common knowledge. I'm not going out making a bold statement or anything. They've said it. Some Republicans are in denial. They don't think it exists. But all Republicans believe government is the problem. And they believe that anything the government does will cost double, maybe triple what the private industry could do faster and better. So private industry, they really want private industry, and they really believe private industry through innovation will solve the problem. And I've got more on that specifically, what they're thinking and what they want to do on later slides tonight. But the federal government still has supporting climate change. Jerry, you see Ruth is up there wanting to be admitted.
All right, I'll take care of her.
Okay, anyway, so while the federal government is still not supporting new policy on climate change, there are two programs in place that make a big difference. One is FEMA seems to have an endless budget. You know, FEMA's come to the rescue on all these big storms. And I have never once heard that FEMA's run out of budget. They're kind of like the military. The military and the FEMA seem to just have a pass on budget. You know, you've never heard once that these $1 billion in arms that we're sending to Ukraine's causing a budget problem. They have said it's causing a production problem, but not a budget problem. But FEMA just has an endless budget. Another thing that's been established is 17 national energy labs. The federal government, a couple decades ago, they came up with this program where they establish national labs and they qualify the labs in certain topics. And you have to be a qualified lab to get government funding. It's been real successful in cancer. There's like 70 federally funded cancer labs, and KU Med Center is one of them. That's why they do so much in cancer. There's also about 60 national labs funded to do Alzheimer's research. And so 17 on national energy labs seems small compared to the others, and it is, but they are funded. They got funded in the first infrastructure bill. I think funded a couple $2 billion. And they're good qualified organizations to do the funding. Right now, if you're curious, most of the funding's going for carbon capture research. By the way, if I was a strategic planner, and this is why Republicans think the government's the problem. If I was a strategic planner, when I did this, I'd go to the president of my company and say, hey, look, we got 70 cancer labs. They're doing fine, but the big problem we got in the world right now is climate change. We need to switch the funding around. And I'd get him to cut the cancer funding in half. That is never going to happen in the political world today. Once anything is funded, it never goes unfunded. We could cure cancer and we'd still have 70 cancer labs. They just do something else. And they'll probably get bigger. That's just the way government works. Okay, Congress is currently working on climate change legislation. And the Democrats really feel they need to pass something before the elections come up in November. And Manchin's actually working on this to come up with a compromise package on climate change that can pass. And he has said there are three things that they favor. One is a carbon border tax, which means that stuff coming in from China that's built cheaper because they're built with coal plants, will put a tax on that stuff over there. Nuclear and carbon capture. Carbon capture, the Republicans are behind big business. Big business really wants the solution to be carbon capture. That way they don't have to change anything. All the big plants they got running now, they just put a carbon capture system on the back end of them, and we've got business as normal. We'll talk about the feasibility of that happening later. Okay, all states and cities are pretty much in the game. They are actively doing what they do, what they can do to fight climate change, because they're closer to citizens and they have to have plans. Each state is unique. That's why each state.
Check.
Yeah.
You said people could interrupt. I'm taking you at your word.
Okay.
Before you got away from the federal too far, one of the things that's always flabbergasted me when you say about the funding and where it goes is that for over 10 years, every time that I've heard the military leaders, when asked what's the biggest problem they face, they say it's climate change. And yet that never seems to get addressed. And anything proposed by Republicans and Democrats. So what do you see with some of your knowledge that I don't have about these different entities? Why doesn't that turn something on?
You know, I don't know, but you're right. Up at Fort Leavenworth, they've got a colonel or general in charge of doing climate change implications to the warfare. I don't know why that's never got connected. There's a lot of things in the federal government that never get connected. So I can't help you out there.
Okay.
We'll hope it does.
Agreed. Thank you.
But, you know, and that could be one of the things I'm going to talk as we go talk about some of the issues and things that could happen, you know, to get that alarmed and concerned group up to 70% or so. And the one that comes to mind right now is not the military saying it's the problem, but I think the most likely one is we'll run out of water in the Southwest. And in Phoenix, they're building new development like crazy. There's developers down there going nuts. There's a whole new city I read about a couple of weeks ago just outside Phoenix, and the mayor admitted that water was a problem and said, we just hope that we could do, when you boil the ocean water, desalination, and get water that way. There'll be a cheap way, but that may be the first thing that gets huge national attention when a whole city has to about virtually shut off their water, and maybe we'll get something done. So on state plans, Louisiana, I say each state is different, and Louisiana is a wonderful state for an example, because they have their own interest and their plan focuses on their own interest. They have a 50-year, $50 billion plan. They're planning on the federal government to pay for it, mostly. And it's, their shoreline is getting destroyed by the storms coming up out of the Gulf. So their focus is to save their shoreline, but it's also to save their oil and gas industry, which is nuts, but that's what their plan is. Hawaii is dependent on imported oil and gas, and they're trying to move to self-sufficiency, and I think they're doing pretty good. I had to throw in this last line because I love to poke fun at the conservative Republicans. Texas and Florida are probably two of the more conservative states in the nation. They would never vote for climate change legislation, but when it comes to storm damage, they are all over, and they're led by Ted Cruz they want their share of FEMA money to fix it. So in fact, Florida's plan is basically that FEMA will fix it when it happens to us. Moving to the cities, and I've got a whole separate slide on California coming up. So but that's a very unique state too. Cities are actively involved, and they're just regularly introducing programs that, like on transportation in cities, electric streetcars. A lot of them gone to LNG bus. Waste collection trucks now are driven by LNG or electric. But anyway, city vehicles are great for the change to electric, and the cities are all looking at that. They're doing it as they can. The cities are really doing good at updating the building codes to address storm surge, to minimize energy usage, and to make sure that homes won't blow over in high winds. I've built garages here in the last 20 years in this Midwest area. In the about 10 years ago, you had to change the structure of new garages, putting bigger headers above the garage door so they wouldn't get blown over by wind. So even here in the Midwest, when you're down on the Gulf Coast, you got to build all those homes on 10-foot stilts and be able to withstand up to at least 100-mile-an-hour winds and sometimes 150. The cities are pretty good about setting good examples with new facilities, being that LEED, which means they're an efficient energy use facility. City codes to stop building in floodplains, that's a big deal. And it's always contentious because developers love to build in floodplains because it's cheap land. It's what happened down in Houston. They built several hundred homes in the floodplain. Then they got that 24-hour rain. And amazingly, all the homeowners said, we didn't know this was a floodplain. Floodplains got to get updated, and you can't let people build in them. And in the Southeast United States, there's going to be that needs to be stopped. And cities are doing what they can do there. Okay, on the state plans, California is special, and it may be one of our best hopes. California's rules predate the Air Quality Act of '67 and the Clean Air Act of 1970. And because of that, in that 1970 timeframe, they sold Congress on the fact we're a desert, we're in a valley, we're got more cars than everybody else. We've got a different pollution problem than the rest of the nation. And so they got exempted from the Clean Air Act, and they can set their own regulation, and they do. And by the way, Trump shut that down, or tried to shut it down when he was president, because he didn't like California being special. But Biden has put California back to being special, where they can set their own rules. Business doesn't like it either, because California will set rules for new cars, and they don't want to have one car for California and the rest a different car for 49 states. So pretty much when California sets a car rule, the car makers end up doing it for all the states. Examples of stricter rules that California has: they now require solar and gas stove on all new homes. They've got some kind of regulation. I didn't have the time to really look it up, but on their electric grid that really encourages solar and wind. And there was an article just came out this week going up. I forgot to put the year in there. On April 30th, 2022, in other words, last week, they virtually hit 100% of their electrical needs all came from renewable power. And there was an accounting issue, and they said it was 99.5%. But anyway, that's a remarkable achievement. That if you'd asked me if they could do that, I said no. So I'm amazed it can be done. And it can be. So the question is, will California lead the way? And they certainly have a lot of problems. The people out there are tuned in. The people out there are panicked. People out there are scared to death of a water shortage. They're scared to death of a fire. You know, they've got the 70% alarmed and concerned group out there, and that's why they're getting stuff done. A friend of mine out there has her bag, her and her husband have their bags packed sitting by the front door so they can do a fast escape if they need to. You know, nobody in the Midwest is ready to do that or even thinking about it. Okay, Jerry, you got another one there, Laura Fisher. Okay, in addition to California being helpful, Vanguard and BlackRock are guiding firms to have climate change plans. What's happened? Vanguard and BlackRock are the leaders in index funds, and they own billions of dollars in index funds. And because they own index funds, they have like 20 to 30% ownership combined of all the major firms in America. And they have, up till a few years ago, they weren't taking it serious to vote those shares. And they still don't vote on direct policy matters. But what they have done, they have set policy that they will encourage and push all firms to have good governance. And there's a whole set of a definition what good governance means, what the board does and doesn't do and that kind of thing, and how it's organized and how it votes. And they also are encouraged every firm to have a climate change plan. So I think you can probably say that every Fortune 1000 firm has a climate change plan of some degree and some credibility. But in that plan, they have to talk about threats to their supply chain, like how it broke down recently. They've got to talk about threats to internal operation if the cost of fuel changes or whatever, threats to their customers that are buying it. And at least they get that stuff down and they talk about it. And hopefully some action's taken place. I was going to mention it later, but I happened to have the good fortune to hear the president of Black Veatch talk about 2 weeks ago. And to my amazement, he had 10 little startup businesses going within Black Veatch that were all to address climate change. And they were on technologies and things I'd never heard of. It was a little bit over my head. But, if Black Veatch has got 10, and Black Veatch isn't even a Fortune 1000 firm, I think you can take 1,000 times 10 and say at least there's 10,000 startup things out there working, trying to find climate change solutions. So it's definitely a reason for hope. Here's the one that I love the most that came out just this last week. It was an article, I think this was in the Wall Street. It might have been in the New York Times. But Stanford received a $1.1 billion grant from a guy named John Doerr, who's worth like $100 million. He's a successful venture capitalist. And the money's for a new climate change school. And I want to read you some of his quotes. Climate and sustainability is going to be the new computer science. And I want to say I 100% agree with him. And I have said, and I'll say it again, when I get to the winners and losers on climate change, probably the number one winner is going to be the civil engineers, because they're the ones that solve all the water problems, whether you don't have enough water, getting you more water, whether you don't have clean water, getting you clean water. And if you have too much water, stopping the floods or building new levees or building walls around the cities, which everybody's doing. So it's big business. It's going to be trillions of dollars. Here's another quote. This is what young people want to work on with their lives, and they want to do it for all the right reasons. And he's right. And I got a slide on this later too, but the passion for this problem is with the young people. It's not for the old white guys like me. The focus of the new school would be developing practical policy and technology. Mr. Doerr is part of the Gates and Buffett Giving Pledge, and I think that's significant because this is going to get publicized through all those billionaires that signed the Gates and Buffett Pledge, and I would think that there will be more money coming for stuff like this. Just, it has to. And there, if other guys have already done it, the most notable one is Bezos, I think, gave $10 billion for climate change. Whoops. Okay, just what I was saying, the youth are passionate about climate change, and passion really matters. I mean, passionate people get 2 or 3 times done what non-passionate people do. If well, you see it in the war in Ukraine right now. The Ukraine soldiers are passionate and the Russians aren't. Makes all the difference in the world. Passion matters. The under 35 segment, they recognize climate change as the #1 issue. We're stuck with what the environment the older generation left us with. Problem with the younger generation, like my child, 40 years old, married with 2 kids, he's so doggone busy with his career and business, he hardly knows what's going on in climate change, although he believes in it. And, you know, if I tell him something he ought to do, he'll do it. But he's just too busy creating the family and his career. Also, and I don't understand this one iota, but I've watched, well, 60 Minutes had a special on it last night. There's a lot of mental health issues with the youth today, and I think it comes from a combination of 3 problems. Income inequality, the youth in California feel there's no way they'll be able to afford a house. And these are all 3 what you call endless problems. Income inequality to them just appears to be an endless problem. COVID, an endless problem. Climate change, an endless problem. And if you can't have a vision for all 3 of those will work out, that's when you start getting mental health issues and or a feeling that they'll work out. So that's another problem that's happening in the youth sector. And that probably treating mental health is getting more focused than climate change in the youth sector. You go to the over 65 segment, climate change is more of a fiscal issue. So my friends tell me they'll buy an electric car when it's a better deal. White respect for taking care of the earth. Everybody says they care about the earth, doesn't mean they do anything. Everybody's comfortable and resistant to change, but older people have the resources, time, and influence to address climate change. So we're hopeful that that'll happen. The headline I captured in the New York Times about, it was last fall when the Paris climate meeting was going on in Scotland. The headline was 2 different generations miles apart. And the story said inside the meeting you had over 100 men, mostly old, and outside the meeting you had thousands of young women protesting. So you've got a big difference, and we need to capture that passion. Okay, recent quote from the Economist magazine. That Economist, if you don't read it, I think it's the world's best publication. It's a weekly magazine. It's like an advanced version of Time. It's an English magazine. I read it every week. Anyway, and they have a climate change article about every week. But they said this. They said, with climate change, people are going through the same thing that people do with grief. In other words, you go through different stages. And the first stage is denial. Everybody denies it. And the second stage is where we are today, involves airy pronouncement about reaching a net zero decades out. So probably, I'm going to guess, I'm just making this up, but like 90% of the Fortune 1000 companies have got a 2030 pledge to be net zero on carbon emissions. But that's 2030. The hard goals for what's going to happen this year and next year are lacking, but we got a lot of pronouncements. The next stage really doesn't happen until you get panicked. And then you have ruthless, practical decisions about redesigning energy systems. And I think we're going to get to that panic stage within about 5 years. I think it's going to be bad enough. And I hate to say I'm hoping for the panic stage, but I sort of am hoping for the panic stage because we got to get going about solving this problem and taking it serious, more serious than we do today. Anybody want to comment on what I've said so far?
Yeah, I have a question. This is Jerry.
Yeah.
I was listening to an interview this morning on NPR radio about how the post office has given out a contract to purchase spend millions of dollars. I don't know the exact number of vehicles, but they want to purchase new gasoline engine vehicles instead of going with EV or even hybrids. And there are lawsuits trying to get this changed because the justification that this was done under the Trump administration was faulty. Louis DeJoy, I guess he's the current helm of the post office, is a Trump person, and he's very resistant to listening to anybody else other than his own opinion on that.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And Louis DeJoy, he's a great example of a great older businessman. I mean, he will straighten out the post office, and he's gotten the post office funded, and he's gotten changes made that nobody else has been able to make over the last 20 years. He's reconfiguring the whole post office system to move to partial delivery from letter delivery. He's closing centers and building new centers. He's got funding. He's been open about the problems, but he's a businessman, and it's all economics to him. And gas is cheaper, so that's why he did it. He's
I
getting
guess one of the arguments is that to maintain these vehicles, though, would be an electric vehicle is a lot less long term, is a lot less expensive to maintain than a gasoline engine.
Yeah, I agree with you. They are. You're right, and I think electric vehicles and gas vehicles are really on par cost wise today because of that. Like, he's classic of your, over 60 white businessman. We just need to get in those guys' minds, and those guys are the ones that are running the Fortune 500. I mean, they just think that way. I shouldn't say that. I think we're up to in the Fortune 500, 40 or 50 female presidents now. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I also wondered, with what you're talking about, it's all pretty much business related, government related, but there's so many things that have started going on about 10 years ago and are going on even more now with the increased temperatures throughout the world. So many places where permafrost no longer exists, and consequently the release of carbon from those earlier carbon sinks are, I've never heard anything that talked about how in the vast wilderness of the Soviet Union and how in northern Canada and places that we have, there's this big release that's coming, and who's gonna pay for carbon capturing that? Or is that not significant? I gotta believe it's significant as heck. Similarly, Brazil and other places in the equatorial areas that the world's depended on forever for consuming carbon on a year-round basis with trees that grow year-round is being devastated and wiped out significantly. That means there's going to be more carbon because there isn't vegetation absorbing it. And we can't plant and grow trees as fast as those kinds of areas are being decimated. So have you run across anything that's given an indication that those kind of happenings are being figured in with anybody's plans or thoughts as to how much more carbon dioxide is going to be in the atmosphere because of those things, even if the industrial entities are going to take over something and do something positive?
No, there is no answer for those that I know of. And you're right, those are huge problems. And we went through a lot of the problems last week. The problems are big. That's why some people have lost hope. And we also don't have solutions for cement, steel, or airplanes. And right now there's 10 billion tons of cement created every year. And it's growing. So yeah, and that's why we've got to innovate to zero. And in the last part of this presentation, I'm going to talk about innovation efforts. But yeah, we got to have innovation to stop that stuff. There's no doubt about it. It's a bad problem. And when I get to regenerative farming, I'm going to talk about we're as guilty or worse than Brazil is for destroying vegetation. We pulled 30 million acres of corn out of that was wetlands and fields, and we're growing corn to make ethanol. So, I mean, we did the same thing they're doing. In fact, we're probably still doing it. It kind of irritates me, actually, because, you know, Brazil, the only reason they're doing it is they can make more money if it's farmland. They're creating farmland. Okay, so we've got to get to the third stage where there's ruthless practical decisions about redesigning energy systems, and it's a #1 problem. It just isn't a #1 problem right now. Like Biden put the cost of gas above it. And Black Lives Matter, the economy, Ukraine, they're all above it. Okay, we need leadership. And there are some leaders that are emerging, and I'm going to talk about the 3 or 4 that I think are most significant: Greta, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, and Larry Fink. And there are a lot of others, and I'm sure you guys can contribute some. But one thing I want to note and challenge each of you to think: can anybody think of a political leader that you would consider to be a leader in climate change? And I can't. You know, Al Gore was, and then he's kind of faded away. And, you know, even the liberals, if you go down to the liberals of the liberals, like AOC and the Squad, they're off on different issues. They'll probably say they're fighting climate change, but it's a footnote in what they talk about.
I might suggest John Kerry as a possibility.
John who?
Kerry, he's kind of the United States climate change czar.
Oh, yeah, he is an absolute good guy. I'm sorry. Yeah, and that is a big thing that Kerry has that job. I haven't seen him getting much done, but yeah, he is a good guy. And I would agree to that. I'm going to move on and talk about each of these. Okay, Greta. Greta's just good because she cares, she's passionate, and she's quotable. And her quotes get out all the time. And they do stir emotion. You know, good leaders stir emotion. She first learned of the climate problem when she was 11, and she was overcome with depression. And she's not totally normal. She's some form of autistic, where there's hundreds of ranges of autistic kids, but she's some type of autistic kid that makes her a little different. But she stopped eating and talking. She got so depressed. And then she came around and started taking action. And her speeches showcased the anger of her generation at politicians and governments that block measures to slow down the problem and work against activists. And her quotes often go viral, and there's very few people that go viral about climate change. So, you know, that's good. Some of Greta's quotes: "You've stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. I've learned you're never too small to make a difference. Right here, right now is where we draw the line. The world is waking up and change is coming, whether you like it or not." Another one: "This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean." This is when she came to the United States to talk to some groups she was invited to talk to. And by the way, she came across on a sailboat, so she wouldn't create any greenhouse gases when she came to the US. "Yet you come to all us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. Yet I am one of the lucky ones." Anyway, she's good, and we probably be good if we could get her speaking and getting her quotes out some more. Whoops, I went the wrong way. Okay, Bill Gates. Bill Gates is an intellectual leader, and he's a smart guy, and he cares a lot about climate change. He wrote a book, and I think the title of the book is reasonably brilliant, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, because he's putting hope in there, how to avoid it. But then he's also saying if we don't, it's going to be a climate disaster. So he's kind of got a nice balance there. He launched Breakthrough Energy Coalition, where he called up about 20 billionaires and got them all to invest like $1 billion. And anyway, he's managing this venture capital fund, if you will. And he's invested in 40 companies that are doing nothing but climate research or climate solutions. They're trying to build climate solutions. And I've got a list of some of them in the back here later on. He is the old style leader, which, you know, he has them write a business plan and tell him what they're going to accomplish in 1 and 3 years and what they're going to accomplish this quarter. Then he has quarterly meetings with them for where he covers, well, what'd you get done this quarter and what's going to happen next quarter. But kind of the traditional way of business. In 2015, he committed $2 billion personally towards climate change. He's committed Microsoft to go carbon negative by 2030, which was nice, but all the big tech firms all committed to go carbon neutral, at least by 2030. And they can do it. In fact, it's real easy for them to do it because they can get off the grid. They can build their own power plants, solar plants right next to their big data centers, and they can fuel their data centers with solar power. So Bill's good, and I like him. Elon Musk is a totally different type of leader. He's a leader by nature, but people pay attention to him. He's very abrupt. He's very opinionated. Doesn't necessarily try to get along with anybody. He started the electric car and battery industry. Without him, we would not be where we are today with electric cars. Tesla's rolling along, and because of that, it's forced Ford and GM to move up their schedules and force several other car companies to get going. Interestingly, he's just opened 2 new factories, so he's up to 4 factories now. He can build 2 million cars a year, and he's got a 9 to 12 month waiting list, even with that kind of capacity. So that's an incredibly successful company. He's a different style manager than Bill Gates, and he just said, I'll give 100 million to anybody that can remove 10 gigatons per year from carbon. You don't have to tell me what you're doing. You don't have to have a plan. Just do it. And it's 100 million. Because of that, you know, hundreds of companies started trying to do that. And just a couple months ago, he did review the status of several of the companies, and I think it was 10. He awarded 10 of them $1 million. He thought they were far enough along with development that they warranted more money, and I think he gave them each $1 million to move forward with more research. This I love. When President Trump started a business advisory council, he asked Musk to be on it, and then Trump withdrew us from the Paris Climate Accord, and the next day Elon was the first guy to quit the thing. Eventually all the business leaders quit because they couldn't get along with Trump. He openly denounces climate denial. We don't have a lot of leaders doing that. He openly advocates for a carbon tax. We don't have a lot of leaders doing that. So he's good. We need him doing more things, and it's kind of a shame he's gotten attracted off on Twitter right now. I'm one of the guys that wishes he'd focus on Tesla and batteries and carbon tax. Larry Fink, I don't even really know him. He's kind of a quiet guy, but he's the chairman of BlackRock. But he is quoted in the business press regularly saying that BlackRock is going to focus all their investments in firms that have good earth care plans and sustainability plans. And because of that, and that's his managed funds too. So he has index funds that he's floating the shares, telling them to have a climate change. Then he's got managed funds where he's telling them, we're not going to invest in you unless we see a sustainable future with you all. And that's big because companies want investments from BlackRock. I think they're the biggest financial firm today. It's kind of amazing that firms like Merrill Lynch and Schwab and all got overtaken by this kind of relatively new startup firm, BlackRock. China. China really wants to be a world leader, just like Putin wants to be a world leader too. They want world recognition. China has a planned economy. Their planners totally blew the 90s. They didn't produce an Amazon, a Facebook, a Google, any of those. In fact, they had to copy what we built. And the reason was, it was obvious that the planners in China couldn't envision a Facebook, a Microsoft, a cloud, an Amazon. So they couldn't tell people to build it. Well, solving climate change is kind of hard goods, and their planners can understand hard goods. And they view batteries, electric cars, solar, etc., as a $1 trillion market over the next 10 years. And they want to be a leader in that $1 trillion market. And they are today a leader in that market. They produce more solar. In fact, we buy our solar panels from them because they're the cheapest source. We buy our wind turbines from them. They're the cheapest source. They're the leader in batteries right now and electric cars. A year ago, they had 100 electric car companies. However, China is growing so fast, and even though they've installed more coal, more solar than we have, it's not enough to support their growth. And so they're having to build coal plants to keep supporting their growth. What I really see happening with China, right now, the leaders of China are prioritizing building a middle class and economic development over climate change. I think in 5 years, when problems get a lot worse, they are just going to come out with a decree that gas-fired cars cannot be built anymore. And they're going to say only electric cars can be built in China. And so I think they'll end up being a leader. There's a real problem with being a leader in that we don't trust them. They steal our technology. And anyway, we really don't want to work. Oh, they use forced labor occasionally too. Some of the Zoom stuff's covered up my last line, so I'm having trouble reading them. And it's because China's using forced labor right now that we've slowed down the import of the solar panels and the wind turbines. Another issue, since China was cheaper, everybody started buying from China. And so our solar and wind industry is reasonably weak because everybody started buying from China. So that's a big issue. I don't know exactly how it'll change. But I do think in the end, China is going to be a help.
Ed, based on that article in Kansas City Star this morning, it seems to me like India is not ever going to be a help or a leader. Seems like they're going in the opposite direction.
Are you asking me that a question?
Yes, Chad. Yeah, or I'm sorry, Chick. Yeah.
Yeah. So India, yeah, they are well aware of climate change. They're just a billion, they're a 1.6 billion people country. They're a poor country. The good news on climate change, their main form of transportation, motorbikes. It'll be fairly easy to switch motorbikes over to gas-powered, or I'm sorry, electric, battery-driven cars or motorbikes. they are so big and so bureaucratic and have so many problems that you're right. They have a great problem addressing climate change. They, Saudi Arabia, some investors from Saudi Arabia came to them and said, let's build the world's biggest solar plants in Western India, which is a desert. It's a great place to build solar plants. And they couldn't get their act together well enough to get it done, even though they had the money coming their way. My focus kind of is China and the US are the leaders in pollution. We cause most of the pollution. We got to get US and China fixed, and I think the rest of the world will follow. That's my own opinion. Okay, any other questions? Because I've ended part one where I'm talking about leadership, programs, funding, etc. There's hope. There's hope, but it needs to move. If there's no questions, I'm going to move on to part two and talk about the technology we need to implement and how to innovate to get to zero. So we have technology available today that we can implement now to get us to 50% reduction in emission. And it amounts to solar, wind, batteries, plant-based milk and meat, regenerative farming, LEDs, efficient buildings, and then just the concept of stop building new roads and start building bike paths. I've got separate slides on the first 5 and I don't on the last 3, so I'm just going to comment on those. LEDs are they're pretty well implemented. That's the one thing that has been implemented. And because of that, electrical usage in homes about 2 years ago or 3 years ago for the first time leveled out. Homes were always getting bigger and using more electricity, but with LED bulbs, they've leveled out, which is good. Efficient buildings and homes. Any home built in the last 5 years is far more efficient than homes built 20, 30, and 40 years ago. I know in my old home I had a new home that was well insulated and efficient. And my gas bill was under $200, and a house across the street that was old and it was lousy insulated had a bill of like $500 a month for gas. So that really makes a difference if you get good insulation and efficient furnaces in the homes. Building more roads or less roads and new bike paths, Colorado is hitting that issue right now because their legislature in the last year passed a policy statement as part of their climate change program that was their policy, that they wanted to quit building new roads and build more bike paths. And that kind of works in downtown Denver. That's what they've done. But up around the Colorado Springs area, there's another new community building up there. And they want another new interstate to their new community. And I don't blame them, but anyway, Colorado's got a big political problem right now is what to do. Should we build a new interstate to the new community and it'll grow, or should we just say we'll have bike paths?
Would you add mass transit to this category?
No, I don't have.
No?
But you're right. Transit probably ought to be there. We can implement mass transit better. I don't know if Americans will ever take the mass transit. Everybody likes driving their car. But Denver has pretty good mass transit too, by the way. Okay, I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about solar, wind, and batteries. The big thing, and this is absolutely true, the cost of solar panels, wind turbines, and batteries have come down over 90% in the last decade. That's really important for 2 reasons. Now solar panels and wind turbines are cheaper than coal and gas fired plants. But it's also important just from the fact that it's possible when you got new technologies that aren't effective and efficient, a 90% cost reduction is practical. So right now on carbon capture, I'm going to say there's 100 carbon capture research projects going, and there are model plants out there working today. They are just not efficient, and they can't go to the scale we need. They need like 99% reduction in cost. But there is hope that those carbon capture efforts we got going today can come down 90%. We know it's possible. It just takes innovation and focus. Electric cars today are better than gas-driven cars, and they're cost competitive. I have a Tesla, and we just bought a Toyota hybrid. My Tesla is 2.5 years old, and I can tell you, compared to my brand new Toyota hybrid, it's a Venza, by the way. Venza. The Tesla is quieter, accelerates faster, has a simpler control system, and it's safer than the Tesla. It's safer than other cars. In general, it's a better car. It's cost competitive because it has no maintenance costs at all. I've had it 2.5 years. I have had a tire problem. I had to replace the tire. Electric cars are 50 to 80% cheaper than gas fueled cars. I can charge my Tesla. It costs about 5 cents per mile to run the Tesla. Whereas today with gas, say at $3.60 a gallon, if you're getting 20 miles a gallon in your car, you're paying 18 cents per mile for gasoline. So it's considerably cheaper. Strong evidence that electric cars will go 250,000 miles. And I think that's honestly true for all new cars today. They'll go 250,000 miles. You don't wreck them and you take care of them. GM and Ford are on track. They're in the news weekly almost talking about their electric cars are going to have in the year 2023. There are two problems with electric cars. One, there's not enough charging systems, and taking trips with them is kind of a pain because you have to, even though the mapping systems will tell you where to go to charge your cars, it takes planning and you got to stop longer. Because of that, we use our Tesla in town. We use it for trips that are under 200 miles or round trip under 200 miles. Tesla's a wonderful car for in-town usage. Their range anxiety is real. You know, you get down under 50 miles, you start worrying how I'm going to charge and where am I? The charging stations just aren't on every corner like they are for gas stations. There are thousands of charging stations out there. It's just not quite the same as gas. But I really think the electric car thing will take off. It just probably needs 5 years to really get rolling well. Okay, now wind and solar plants are cheaper than coal and gas-fired generation. New wind and solar plants can price out about 3 cents to 6 cents per kilowatt hour. Right now, you're paying about 14 cents per kilowatt hour if you're on KCP&L, or as it's called now, Evergy. So wind and solar are clear winners. A solar plant with battery backup is now competitive with a gas-fired plant. So now you don't have now you can say a solar plant can run 24 hours a day because you can put battery backup with it. Because of the low cost of solar power, it's easy for IT firms to commit to zero carbon footprint. You know, Facebook announced a great big new data center in North Kansas City, said they were going to build a solar plant next door to it. They're basically off the grid. They're zero on their power. And that's what all the big IT firms are doing today. It's a good deal. It's kind of too bad for Evergy or the big utility companies, because if any of you that have been in business, they're big customers that are the whole key to your profitability. And so the electric power companies stand to lose all their big customers because they can build their own solar plant and batteries and just leave the main utility. And the main utilities are all fighting that because they don't want to lose their big customers. In Industrial plants can do the same thing. And I do think I read a story about an aluminum plant in Denver that was building solar generation next door. The idea of a company building their own generation 20 years ago was kind of considered nuts, because who wanted to build a coal-fired power plant? Because they're big, they're complicated, they take a lot of people to run and maintain. Solar is simple, easy to run and maintain. So that's why companies are willing to do it. Okay, just interrupt with questions if anybody wants to comment about solar or wind. The other industry I see taking off is plant-based meat. If you remember from last week, beef is like 10% of the problem, creating greenhouse gases. Beef's a $45 billion a year industry with flat growth. Artificial meat's a $3 billion industry expected. Well, it is growing 20% a year. If any of you have had Beyond Meat or Miracle Impossible Meat or whatever, you generally can't tell the difference, and you certainly cannot tell the difference if the meat's in a hamburger or it's meatballs and spaghetti and meatball. Once you get all the sauces on it, the lettuce on it, the bun around it, you just can't tell the difference in the plant-based meat. McDonald's has been testing a McPlant burger, and they've announced that they're about to go nationwide. But better than that, they have announced that as they go nationwide over the next, it's going to take them a year or two to do it, that they're going to make it a major part of their PR program, that they are a sustainable company and that they're using plant-based meat. And so when you have a firm like McDonald's doing that and putting that kind of PR behind it, it's a good deal. And then virtually every other meat company is doing the same thing. They're trying to come out with their own line of plant-based meat. And Tyson's coming out with their own line of chicken. Chicken, I think every kid in America eats chicken nuggets. And I guarantee you, by the time you deep fry a plant-based chicken, you will not be able to tell the difference between the two. Plant-based meat is going to win for other reasons too, because it's good for your health. We can reduce heart issues in America considerably. Animal rights issues, people want it to happen. And then we have what I call the 390s, the plant-based food. They use 90% less land, 90% use less water, and 90% less CO2 generation. And that's just a big winner. And you can't, that'll be tough for the beef guys to fight. The beef guys are fighting. They're all over regulation to try to keep them in business and names, not to be able to call plant-based meat. So Impossible Burger's probably all right. But I do really think this industry is going to take off. And I think the feedlots are going to have trouble. And by the way, if the feedlots have trouble, they use a third of the corn. So right now we've got 90 million acres of corn planted in America. 30 million goes to ethanol, 30 million goes to feedlot, 30 million goes to, well, some of it goes to food, and then there's a bunch of other usage. But we can virtually eliminate 60 million acres of corn if we can get out of feedlots and we can get out of ethanol, which I'm all for. Unfortunately, Biden just said that ethanol was okay for a little longer. And by the way, if you give this presentation and say what I just said up in Iowa, you'll get shot. Iowa's whole economy is based on corn. The fact that the first primaries up there, to get through the presidential primary, you go up there and you pledge allegiance to ethanol, and then you get through the first primary. So the Democrats have been talking about moving away from Iowa for the first primary. I think that's a wonderful idea. I've had farmers in the class, and they're sensitive about it. Anytime you threaten anybody's business, they are going to get really sensitive. They're going to get mad. They're going to get emotional. It's just normal. And so the corn guys will, and the feedlot guys will. They're not going to let this just happen. They're going to fight it. Okay, milk-based substitutes. I'm going to ask a question right now. Has anybody seen Oatly or drank Oatly? milk. I haven't, but it's incredibly popular. So anybody in the group out there tasted Oatly milk?
I have.
What'd you think? Where'd you get it?
Oh, Hy-Vee's got it. I put it on my cereal, but I gotta say, the flavor was okay and the texture was a little less than what I would have liked. I primarily do soy-based milk at this point.
Yeah, but you got oat-based milk as opposed to the brand Oat.
No, I did try Oatly itself.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, Oatly has gone crazy with the young people, and I don't understand it. But I haven't had it yet. And I'm probably, if I tasted, I'd probably be just like you. But it's a milk substitute made from oats. It's been grown rapidly in recent years. Its signature product is now in 60,000 retailers, 32,000 coffee shops in more than 20 countries. I think they're a Swiss-based firm, and those numbers actually are a year old, so you could probably add 20% to each of them. Shares of Oatly could soar as much as 80% amid a boom in oat milk, according to Bank America, and they wrote that in August of last year. Growth in oat milk is evidence, and Starbucks is where they're getting the big word out. Starbucks has doubled their order for oat milk from Oatly to better meet demand. And then I just Googled it the other day, and it said they had record revenues in the first quarter of this year. So it's going nuts. If you go to the grocery store today, the plant-based milks take up about the same amount of space as regular milk. So it's moving, it's happening. And I'm sure you get your 390s again, your 90% less water, 90% less land, and 90% less CO2 generation. Okay, regenerative farming. We need to move from what I call industrial farming. In fact, it's called industrial farming in the industry to regenerative. Let me go to my next slide and define industrial first. Whoops, wrong way. Today's farmer pretty much does industrial farming. Industrial farming is when you plow the field, you seed, you fertilize, spray pesticides, fungicides, or herbicides, whatever you need to, and you repeat that process every year. Today's farmers, particularly if you're like 50 years old or 60, you've been doing this forever, it's the only way you know to do farming. And when somebody comes and tells you to make a big change, you're extremely reluctant to do it. I will say the government, the FDA, is going out and giving seminars actively today, telling farmers that regenerative farming is a better way to go. And in regenerative farming, you don't plow the field. Anybody of you that read your history, the Dust Bowl was created because as the settlers moved out west, they plowed the fields so fast, which was the wrong thing to do. And the Dust Bowl was a man-made hazard. So that takes us to regenerative farming. Let me go back to regenerative farming. There's a Netflix documentary called Kiss the Ground. It's wonderful. It's about a 60-minute documentary that you can watch. If you don't have Netflix, there's a YouTube documentary called Living Soil. It's almost as good. It defines regenerative farming. So what is regenerative farming? First thing you've got to start with is what's the difference between dirt and soil? Dirt is the brown stuff you see on the infield of a baseball field. It has no organisms in it. It's powdery. It blows away in a windstorm. Soil is black. The best soil has a texture kind of like pudding. It smells like fertilizer. I mean, it has a big, strong smell. But the key to it is it has literally billions. In one scoop of soil, you have billions of organisms living in there. And the key to good farming is having those billions of organisms living in the soil. And when you plow, you mess up that. So plowing is, even though we've done it forever, is not a good thing. And when you plow, your field doesn't have a cover crop on it. So that's a problem too, because you always want cover crops to keep the organisms underneath growing. Today's kind of a difference between an industrial farmer and a regenerative farmer. An industrial farmer gets up with the attitude of how am I going to kill something today, be it a weed, a fungi, or whatever. A regenerative farmer gets up every morning and goes, how am I going to grow more stuff today? And they say they're a rancher, they're growing the organisms in the soil, and that's the key to success. So you keep characteristics of regenerative farming, you keep cover crops on the ground year round, you rotate crops annually, you use no fertilizer. In the documentary Kiss the Ground, the rotation that they use, and they openly say there's different rotations that work, but they have cattle and what they do, they take a big farm and divide it into 5 and 10 acre plots, and they have little fences around each one. And so on one 10-acre plot, they have cattle that year, and the cattle poop and pee on it, and they stomp on the ground, and combination of all that makes the field more fertile. The next year, they put a bean crop on it called a lagoon. Lagoons, by the way they grow, they actually put fertilizer in the soil. And then the third year, they plant a grain crop, and it uses up the fertilizer. And this is a traditional way. You go back 50 years ago, before industrial farming, fertilizers and herbicides were so big, this is what farmers used to do. And we're kind of going back to it. But it's a challenge. And if you just know the other way, you're not so inclined to do it. I think something like 10 to 20% of the US farming is converted to regenerative farming. In the Netflix Kiss the Ground, or some videos I've watched, and I think it was Kiss the Ground, it was young female farmers that were leading the way in getting this done and implementing this style of farming. But anyway, it's definitely the younger generation that's doing it. Okay, that kind of ends my talk on getting the 50% reduction through solar panels, wind turbines, electric cars, LEDs, regenerative farming. We just need all of those. They're all like 10% implemented. We need them all to go to 100% implemented. There needs to be a big program on it. So what are we going to do? Because we don't have solutions for the rest of the problem, like the permafrost melting or the forest that's sucking in CO2 today. The concept is, and this is what Gates says, and I agree with him, we must move to no new carbon emissions, which just stops carbon emissions at 450. By the way, that is the plan. That's what the goal that the Paris Climate Accord sets up. We're going to stop the CO2 concentration at 450. It's at 420 today, which means we're not at a new normal today. It's going to get a whole lot worse if we go to 450. That's where we're going to see maybe 30, $40 billion storms in a year rather than 20. We're going to see Phoenix or somebody in the Southwest run out of water. But that's the plan. But even once we implement the plan, we've got lousy weather because we're at 450. So we've got to reduce the CO2 that's in the atmosphere today. Gates and most everybody says to get back to the 280 billion parts, which is what it was prior to the Industrial Revolution. I would be thrilled if we got back to 400, 390, or 380, which is kind of where it was in the 1990 time frame. And I thought the weather was reasonable back then. Except existing technology will not get us there. We must innovate. It's only through innovation that we will get there. We are capable of innovation. We've solved problems with innovation in the past. For those of you that have read history, you know that in 1900, the biggest problem in New York City was horse manure. It was all over. They couldn't get enough horses and carts and wagons to move it out of the city. There was editorials written about it. It was a big deal. Along comes the automobile and totally solves the problem. We had acid rain in the 1970s. And we solved it. And solving it was a little like carbon capture in a way. What we did was we caught the exhaust out of a power plant in a big room, like, the size of 4 or 5 gymnasiums or something. And we sprinkled some chemicals through the exhaust, which caused the sulfur and the nitrogen to precipitate out. Anyway, solved the problem. And those are called scrubbers that we implemented actually we implemented them in the 80s and 90s. Transistor came along in the 50s and created all kinds of capabilities. We had tailpipe emissions in the 60s, and I think this is where California led, was the first state to require catalytic converters. Again, you capture the exhaust, put it through the catalytic converter, it comes out good on the other side. It worked. The pollution from cars is greatly reduced. In addition, remember in the 70s when we had the energy crisis, more efficient everything was invented. Heating and cooling systems went from 65% efficient to 80 and 90% efficient. Refrigerators got more efficient. Autos went from 12 miles a gallon to 20 miles per gallon. LED light bulbs came out. So anyway, America has been good at innovation. America is and was the leading contributor to climate change. In other words, we put most of the CO2 up there. Now China's putting more CO2 up there than we are. But I also strongly believe we will produce the innovation needed to solve the problem. We just need to get focused on it. We always have, and I think we will again. 2 approaches to solving climate change. There's Gates, innovate to zero. He basically says people are going to resist changing their lifestyle, like telling everybody to go to mass transit or telling everybody to get off beef. They're not going to do it unless it's easy. Solar, wind, batteries, and regenerative farming aren't going to solve all the problem. If you think it will, what's your solution for cement? That's Gates's quote. He just asked people that. So we got to innovate to zero. The Project Drawdown project's a great idea. I totally support it. I don't believe it's going to get us to zero, but we're getting people preserving natural resources, which is good. We're getting focused on reduce, reuse, and recycle. That's good. Project Drawdown would focus on quit using fertilizer. Gates just says we need to invent a new fertilizer. Or maybe it's regenerative farming. I don't know which it is, but we need to focus on innovation. Okay, if we're going to innovate, where do we need to innovate? And this is Gates' version of where the greenhouse gases come from. It's a little different than the one I presented last time, but making things. Cement, steel, plastic, oil, and gas, we have no solution for any of those. Plugging in, creating electricity. We have a pretty good solution for electricity. Growing things, plants and animals. We've got plant-based meat and plant-based milk. We got regenerative farming. So we got some decent solutions there. Getting around, cars, it's a major problem. We've got some good solutions there, but we're lacking solutions for planes and cargo ships. Keeping warm, heating, cooling, refrigeration. We've got some solutions there. We've got heat pumps. We've got geothermal. We've got to get those on a strong implementation schedule, or we've got to come up with some innovation, a new way to do it. So how's that going to happen? Oh, we presently have no solution for cement, steel, and air travel. And my point here is these are big things and they're significant. Cement's 8% of the greenhouse gas emissions. It's 10 billion tons a year. I double checked that number. I checked that number 3 or 4 times because I couldn't believe it was that big. and it is a growth industry. It's a lot of it is China just building new roads. They're kind of the leader in new roads. Steel, 4 to 5%, 1.8 billion tons per year. It is also a growth industry. We're still building new buildings and we're still building them out of steel. There is a solution there where you can build them out of timber, and it does work, but nobody's jumped on it yet. It hadn't been promoted. You can even build high rises out of wood. Air travel, 9% of the greenhouse emissions. It is a growth industry. I didn't bother to look up the quantity, but I'm guessing there's millions of flights per year that go. And now that COVID's done, everybody wants to travel again. Get back to air travel. Gates on the generic approach to solving climate change. And if you've read his book, Innovate to Zero, or I'm sorry, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, this is just, I'm quoting stuff right out of his book. But we need to electrify every process. So we need to electrify the making of steel. We need to electrify airplanes, etc. We've got to get the electricity from a decarbonized power grid. And then we've got to use carbon capture to absorb the remaining emissions. Use material more efficiently. Notice he doesn't say reduce usage. This requires innovation. Okay, Gates on what we can all do. And I think his first one is by far the most important, and that's to be a good citizen. Let our politicians know we want investment in new technologies for solving climate change. We want policies that curtail greenhouse gases. And really, you just need to tell your friends that you think climate change is a problem and this is what you're doing about it. Be a big consumer, be a good consumer, things like energy efficiency, electric car, plant-based meat, green pricing from your utility. You can sign up with KCP&L to help fund their solar plants. Don't buy or use single-use plastics. That's an easy thing anybody ought to be able to do. Be a good employee or employer. Advocate for carbon neutral. You know, if your company's not a good user, efficient user, and you're creating a carbon problem, you need to be vocal about it. The list that Jerry and I put together a long time ago is more of a list on what you can do, like eat less meat, and it's very similar to Gates' second one. The thing I've added to it is everybody ought to be doing one of these, or two of them. In fact, do one or two, and then tell somebody about it. The more people we tell, the more people we talk to about it, it's going to help. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Those are kind of buzzwords, and I decided I could communicate to people better if I just said eliminate your trash. People understand eliminate trash. The way you eliminate trash is you don't buy it to start with, or you reduce it, you reuse it, so you get a plastic container and you reuse the plastic container, or you recycle. Homeowners, eliminate fertilizer. I've got a problem with that personally. I like nice green yards, but I've kind of read about a new way to go about it that I'm going to try next year. I'm going to try eliminating fertilizer on my yard. I do have an electric car and a hybrid. We've worked at eliminating our trash and we're doing pretty good at that. I have planted trees and I have signed up with the solar subscription program with KCP&L. Hey, anybody have any comments on the need for innovation or what they think about innovation?
Do you have any thoughts on the use of modular nuclear?
Yeah, I got a slide on that a little later, but
Okay.
I think that's a winner. And I'm hoping that that comes through. The modular nuclear, I get fission and fusion mixed up, but it's based on the other one, not what current plants are based on. It's safer and it doesn't have a fuel waste program. And it's one of the pilot plants was the word. Gates and a few other guys are funding nuclear power plants, modular power plants. And it's notable that Europe, in their fuel crisis, when they're having to give up Russian oil and gas, they are going back to nuclear because they just don't see another source. China is going nuclear. I mentioned that China has built more solar and wind plants than we have by a long ways, and it hadn't even made a dent in their usage, and they know it. China has 100 to 150 nuclear plants either in operation or being actively built today. That's all. And for a reference point, we have 60 nuclear plants in the United States, and we're extending the life of every one of them. It's amazing we're extending the life. But nuclear, I view as a winner. I hope it works. Okay. We've got to adapt, regulate, and innovate. Let's talk about doing all three of those. Adaptation just means to learn to live with the situation. If you go down to Lake Pontchartrain, all the houses are, they're just outside New Orleans. All those houses are built on stilts. It's required by regulation. All the houses are made to withstand 150-mile-an-hour winds. And that's beginning to happen. It's all along both the East Coast and the Gulf Coast. Build bigger reservoirs upstream to prevent floods. Remove levees and reestablish wetlands. Wetlands soak in a lot of CO2. Move to higher ground. That's starting to happen. It's kind of interesting in Miami, all the expensive housing is built on the low ground by the ocean. The poor people are in the center where it's higher, and they're on the higher ground. And anyway, now the rich people want to build the higher ground, buy the higher ground in the middle of Florida. Conserve water. Use less water in farming. Stop irrigation. In other words, watering crops with irrigation by flooding. Build bigger walls. Every coastal city is going to do this. It's going to be a huge business. The city of Manhattan just finished the wall. Houston's hidden walls. They're all going to do it. And New York, at one time, had a $100 billion plan, I think, to build walls that they wanted the Corps engineers to do. I think that's on hold. Golf courses and landscaping are probably going to go away, particularly in the Southwest. You're going to see a total change in that as golf courses go dry. And you're going to wonder, I wonder what a house on a golf course is worth when the golf course is brown, because it's a desert. Anyway, those are all ideas for adapting.
Jane has a comment in the chat.
Okay.
Can you see that?
No, I don't see the chat. I don't know how to
I'll read it to you. It says, do you have any comments about uranium mining or lithium mining? It seems many of these mines are located on indigenous people's lands, and mining creates toxic waste for the people living there.
Yeah, mining of lithium is definitely a problem. And that goes back to China is the world leader in lithium and the precious metals.
Dick, you're fading out for some reason.
Pardon?
You were fading out there.
Okay, well, sure. So China is the world leader in these precious metals, and they're the leader in batteries because they're the leader in it. They're the leader for two reasons. One is they honestly believe when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So they go down there in Africa where these mines are, and they work out a deal with the leaders. And the deal generally involves using slave labor, and it involves poor environmental techniques, and they really pretty much rape the land. We will not do that. We definitely believe when in Rome, we should tell the Romans how to live. And so we wouldn't do that type of thing. The other thing, China has lax environmental laws. And so they have the plan. And precious metals, or rare earth metals aren't necessarily rare. They're all over actually, but they are in small quantities. Like you don't get like a vein of lithium, like you can get a vein of gold or a vein of coal. You just get little bits of lithium scattered all throughout the soil. So you have to harvest a whole bunch of the soil and then you got to process it. It's a huge mess. And China doesn't mind making the huge mess. That's why they've got the plants. Okay, we have in America some good sources of these same lithium and rare earth minerals. One's in the Salton Sea in California. Another's in the, there's like a Dead Sea thing in Nevada. I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, they're rich in these minerals and they're trying to get them permitted. And, you know, we'd permit to American standards. But in America, you know, we base decisions on what's in it for me. And we don't want anything in my backyard. And so while the permitting process in China is 6 to 12 months, the permitting process in America for something like that is 5 years or never. So we're working on permits and we can do it. And we can do it cleanly if we can just get permits. And I don't know if we ever will. Oh, there's some in, I think, North Carolina too. If you read a lot of articles, you'll stumble on efforts to mine this rare earths in America. And which comes to the topic of make permitting easier. You know, America is addicted to China. We are addicted to China because they provide goods cheaply. The reason they provide goods cheaper than us is they keep their labor costs below us, but they keep their environmental rules less than ours. They keep their safety rules less than ours. And no, their permitting is much easier in China. So they're always going to be cheaper than us, and we're always going to rely on them. And I'm not sure that, I don't know what's going to happen. It's a big issue. Trump raised the issue. It's probably the best thing Trump did in his presidency. He raised all the China issues, said China's screwing us and we got to stop it. And he put a lot of tough policies on China. Biden came along and everybody thought the Democrats may change them, but he left them all in place. And that's why our solar and wind implementation is slowing down. Okay, going to regulatory examples. The number one thing we can do that will help more than anything is a carbon tax. So you've got the real cost of goods. So like on beef that comes from cattle, add a 20 or 30% tax because of the carbon that's being, or the CO2 that's coming out of the cows, the methane. On gas, add $1 a gallon tax to pay for the greenhouse gases that are being emitted. I mean, we all have to pay to clean it up, so we might as well tax the source of it. This is the one that the Republicans in Manchin are just coming up with today. Implement a border carbon tax. Basically says tax stuff from China because it's more built by coal-fired power plants. Another thing I got a note on the carbon tax. The oil companies are now in favor of it. The 100 research projects or pilot plants that are going on carbon capture, all those guys are in favor of it because they need to get paid to remove the carbon to make it cost effective. And a carbon tax would end up being a negative tax for them because they're pulling carbon out of the air. And so they're all in favor of it. And to me, it's just baffling. The oil companies are in favor of a carbon tax and we haven't got a bill up. I don't know why we don't. Other regulatory examples, don't let people build in flood zones. Developers will ignore that if you give them a chance. The fire zone 2 in California and Denver or Colorado, we need to be careful where we're building houses. Continually update flood zones and fire zones. Don't permit new oil and gas wells. We're doing it. Don't permit new oil and gas pipelines. We're doing it. Don't permit new coal plants. China's actively doing it. We're not doing that very much. I think we may have quit that. Make permitting for solar and wind smoother. Now, you see solar, Texas is the leader in solar. The reason is Texas has open space and they have less regulation. It's easier to permit. And where there's more space in the Southwest, it's a lot easier to get solar in. When you get up in the Northeast where it's kind of a concrete jungle, it's a lot harder to get solar and wind. So you're seeing offshore wind, which is a good thing. Permitting a new transmission line's easier. Here in Kansas, we've got a tremendous amount of wind power. We need to be able to export it to Oklahoma, to Indiana, or to Illinois. Getting those permits is a problem. I think they ought to be easy to get. The farmers have some valid objections holding them up. So, oh, water. Regulatory examples on water. I could be wrong on this because I've only read it once, but I've read that the Colorado River Pact was written in 1926, and it was a 100-year agreement, which means it expires in 2026. So that means dividing up that Colorado River is coming up here in 4 years. And there are thousands of lawyers working on that right now of how to divide that water up in the best way. And of course, everybody, the farmers and the cities, and well, everybody has a different opinion and different geography. Like my son and I own a condo up in Winter Park. And I just think we ought to keep the water up there. It's my own personal interest. But anyway, dividing up the water and water regulation is going to be a big deal. And that's another reason. All these problems get settled by lawyers. So lawyers are going to be huge winners in climate change.
Hi, Chick.
Yeah.
This is Jane. I asked the question earlier. Thanks, Jerry, for reading my question. I don't have a video today. I wonder why your list does not include cap and trade on CO2 emissions. That was a fairly successful program to control acid rain. And I wonder why, there are already regional cap and trade programs like the RGGI in Northeast. And do you think there's some benefit when you do the carbon tax? How do you ever know if you got the tax right? You might have to keep raising the tax, and people don't like that.
No, you are absolutely right. And it's a big error that I left that off. I don't have all the regulatory examples on there, but cap and trade should definitely be on it. It would be a very effective program.
Oh, thank you. I just thought maybe, there's some reason you didn't like it, or was,
No, I just sit down and write these presentations and I write what comes to my mind.
Thank you.
And it just didn't come to my mind. Yeah, and that's great that you kind of caught an error I made it, because I do make errors. I will openly admit it.
Chid, I was having problems getting on a while ago, and I just want to be the third one to say that I think that nuclear is a big answer. When you look at Germany's impossible thing of saying they're going to get rid of their 80% of their electrical production is coal-fired, they're not going to do it without nuclear. And similarly, I think the designs that Gates has largely helped implement are significantly better than what they were even 5 years ago, let alone 25 years ago, 20 years ago, when the one in Kansas was built.
Yeah.
And also, I wonder, have you run across whatever happened to hydrogen fuel? I thought that was almost developed at one time, and to me, to be blowing water out your tailpipe seems to be a heck of a solution, good solution.
Okay, I just pulled up my next slide. And these are the technologies that I think Gates is actually funding. And I don't even know what some of them are, but I underlined the three that I had the most hope for. Carbon capture, nuclear fission, and hydrogen as a fuel. On both hydrogen as a fuel and carbon capture, I think there are 100 like lab-based models built and maybe 10 or 20 pilot projects actually out there in the real world working today. Hydrogen, if you read it, half the articles say it's impossible, and another half the articles say it's going to work. Carbon capture, I haven't read as many opinions on whether it'll work or not, but I've read a lot of opinions that say it has to work. And the big oil companies all favor it, and the Republicans tend to favor it because of Republicans don't like change, and they like the big revenue producing factories to stay in place. And if we can put carbon capture on the rear end of them, they don't have to change all the factories. It's a wonderful solution. Nuclear, I kind of agree with you. It's just got to be. It's going to be hard to get a stable electric system with just solar, batteries, and wind power. You just need a little more diversity in the source. Nuclear is a good base load, run 24-hour a day technology, and it can be really pretty cheap when it's run 24 hours a day. So anyway, all these, there are development projects going on today in all of these technologies, and actually a whole lot of technologies I don't even have listed on here. I think the 10 that Black Veatch was doing aren't even listed on here. They were all different. So there is work happening.
Jack, I have a question about your slide, the top of the second column. Do you mean nuclear fusion there instead of fission?
I think you corrected that last time, and I thought and looked it up. The answer is I have no clue which is right. What's the current
down below you have next generation fusion or fission, but then fusion is kind of something they talk about but haven't figured out yet.
Okay, well, what are current plants? Are they fusion or fission?
Fission.
Fission? Well, then it's nuclear fusion. That's what Gates was trying to find.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I got it wrong.
This is Jane again, and I want to make a comment that is also on this slide. I met a professor over at KU, and he's a wonderful man. His name is Mark Shiflett, Shiflett, Mark Shiflett. And he is working really hard. He has all these wonderful academics and Westinghouse and all the coolant companies that make air conditioners. And they're trying to develop a special laboratory to create those new coolants that don't have the fluorine gases. And if he can get this going, it could really be a technology could come out of it, just as you say. And if you go to drawdown, it says one of the better things we can do is to contain those coolants for the refrigeration. And if they can do it, so KU is actively pursuing this incredible laboratory just to answer this very question. I'm so impressed by the folks over there. Just a comment.
I'm real happy you brought him up. And the reason I'm happy is he's not the only one doing that kind of stuff. My estimate is there are at least 10,000 guys or gals like him around the world doing that stuff today. I looked up, I think there's 25,000 PhD programs in the world, and every PhD program is doing research in climate change or how to get around climate change. It's happening all over. And PhD students, there's 100,000 of those, and they're working on it. And he's got PhD students helping him. So, yeah, that's where the hope comes from, is 10,000 programs just like his. And they're there. I guarantee you they're there. fact, KU probably has a half dozen more you don't even know about.
Yeah, thank you. I was so impressed when I met this man and his students also. It's just amazing. They're really taking on the whole industry, and I think if they get that laboratory up and running, they'll really make a difference.
Yeah.
Kudos.
Who's there? Jerry, are you talking?
No, I'm not talking yet.
Okay. Well, I'm going to move onward, and these are all good comments. We got to get done with this thing. Just one note, new technology comes unexpectedly, and it happens when we don't even know we need it. And it'll just come out of left field, like the car did in 1900, the TV come out. The internet, I remember when it popped up in the 1990s, I swore I could live without it. When cell phones came up, I swore I didn't need it. Now I'm addicted to both of them. But new technologies just come out of no place, and there's going to be technology come out of no place. It's going to help us solve climate change. And your KU professor, he's a good example. There's tens of thousands of him out there. Gates and Musk are two leaders, and they both have two different ways of trying to solve it. Musk has got his $100 million award out there, and Gates has these 20 funded programs he's monitoring and pushing, but they're important. And then you got your federal energy labs, 17 of them. If each lab has 3 or 4 programs going, that's, what's that, 60, 80 climate change programs just right there. Looking for something. Okay, on trillions of dollars of economic creation and destruction. I try to always say this because business drives the world and what happens, but the winners, and go back to John Durr's comment, the guy that founded the new school at Stanford and funded it with $1 billion on sustainability. He's producing people that are going to run all these industries: electric cars, battery supply chain, battery manufacturing, solar panel, wind turbines, rare earth metals, weather forecasting, solar installers, tree trimmers to trim the trees up in Oregon and California so it won't control the fires, meteorologists. Economic destruction is going to happen. There's going to be cities that are going to be wiped out. Jobs are going to be wiped out. Auto repair, I'd say 10 years from now, there will be half as many Firestones as there are now. In 20 years, there may be no Firestones or independent car dealers. Oil and gas industry will go away. I think the ethanol industry will go away. Feedlots. And what I'm saying there, the whole economy of Iowa is going to go away when you start talking about ethanol and the corn for the feedlots. So that's a big deal. And Iowa needs to change. Coal miners, oil field workers, there's going to be huge changes out there. That's the whole point. And people have to adapt to change. These are some of the slides I had from last time about what's going to happen just from the problem. Home Depot and Walmart are going to be successful because Jerry says they're ambulance chasers. They set up outside every $1 billion storm and start selling blue tarps, generators, and 2x4s. Civil contractors to address all the water problems and the walls we're going to build. Home builders, 1,000 homes went down in Colorado and California. There's not enough labor to build those things today. They're going to take 3 to 5 years to rebuild. Water suppliers, my son invested in an ETF that specializes in investing in water companies. There's shortages of firefighters, that's to fight the forest fires. First responders today. Economic destruction, tourism's going to be hit hard. Lake Mead, the whole Southwest is a tourist type area with golf and tennis and swimming and boating. That's going to go down. Eventually, coastal property. I talked about Florida last year. The values are going up there rapidly right now. It's because of income inequality, and the rich made so much in the stock market. The market doubled in 3 years there, 19, 20, and 21. And so Florida property went up as all those people went down and started grabbing it up. And by the way, I have talked to people that own Florida property, and I've asked them about climate change. And their basic answer is, yeah, it'll probably happen. Yeah, there's a chance my property will get ruined, but I don't care. It's a second home and I can afford it. The fishing industry worldwide is going to be devastated. Leisure activities like golf and heat dome areas. Houses, businesses, cars, farms, and floodplains and storm zones. We went through what happened from Katrina and Sandy, the 5 big storms, and it's thousands of cars and $1 trillion of destruction. Those storms are going to keep coming. Those homes and businesses are going to keep getting ruined. Service areas and impacted areas, in the big storm areas, the professionals just move out and move on, and the service workers are stuck there without anybody to serve. Your restaurant workers, hotel workers, etc. So anyway, I'm just trying to plant in everybody's mind, and my lists are not accurate. I've just made these up as I thought about them. There is going to be $1 trillion of economic destruction and construction. And your goal in life is to position yourself and your family for success. Make the Me Too generation in America kind of, help it. If everybody does what they ought to be successful, climate change will end up getting solved greatly. So that ends my presentation, Jerry, and I took more time than I meant to.
I'm amazed that we still have 10 to 11 people that signed in. That is amazing after two hours. I wanted to mention, last time you mentioned also the ski industry. It will be one of the fatalities.
Yeah.
Climate change.
Yeah, they're losing about a day a year to the season. So, in 30 years, the ski season may be half as long as it is today.
Yeah. I might let people know before they leave that we plan to put a recording of this talk on YouTube, and also you're going to send me and Chad your slides, and when we will send 2 sets of slides and 2 sets of recordings for both your presentations when we get them back.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
I appreciate your help, Jerry, and Chad. I appreciate your help pulling this thing together.
Yeah,
I like to do this kind of stuff. I've been teaching it for 2 years off and on. It keeps me busy in retirement.
Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. If people want to hang around and chit chat, that's okay for a while longer.
Well,
If anybody wants me to teach a course at their church or their community center or any place, I'm more than happy to do it. And
You might mention you got a class coming up in July out at Tallgrass, right? Through KU Extension.
Out there at Tallgrass.
Yeah.
It's part of the KU Osher Institute. So you sign up for it through KU Osher, OSHER.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Chick, thanks so much for presenting tonight. You had so much thorough information and knowledge. I mean, it really shows your passion and your intelligence about this. And you've left us a lot to think about. And I hope everybody enjoyed the conversation, and it sparks more conversations with their families and on the way they live their lives. So anyway,
that's the key.
Yes.
Chad, that's the key. Go talk about it.
Right, exactly. So just some announcements. Currently, we don't have a specific person scheduled for June's meeting. So if any of you know of somebody that you think might be a good option for presentation, let Jerry or I know, and we'll work on that. But we'll also be kind of looking around for somebody to give a presentation. So anyway, just watch out for an email from me and Jerry about next month's program. So thanks for coming tonight, and you all have a great night, okay?
Good night.
Yep. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.